The first scream of the night did not come from a human voice, but from a dog's throat. A ragged, bone-deep howl tore across the silent fields, startling birds into the air and echoing off the stone walls of the abandoned village square. The sound rose again, longer this time, a desperate plea rather than a warning. It came from the direction of the old well, the one people whispered about but rarely approached after dark. Its stones were slick with moss, its mouth sealed with a rotting wooden lid that no one had touched in years. Yet the stray dog, thin, mud-streaked, ribs sharp against its skin, stood over it with fur bristling, paws scraping the ground as if it were trying to claw open the earth itself. Detective Clara Hensley was the first to respond. She had been driving home weary-eyed from a double shift when her radio crackled with reports of a disturbance in the outskirts of town. She had almost ignored it. Stray dogs howled all the time, but something in the dispatcher's voice, strained and uneasy, made her turn the wheel. Now she stood beneath a flickering streetlight, breath clouding in the cold night air, watching. The dog circled the well. Its eyes caught the light and flashed wild, haunted as though it had seen something unspeakable. "Easy, boy," Clara whispered, though her own heart rattled against her ribs. She took a cautious step forward. The dog froze, muscles taut, then barked once sharp. Furious sand slammed its weight against the wooden cover. The lid shuddered, dust rising in thin clouds. Clara's hand drifted to her holster, not out of fear of the animal, but because instincts told her whatever was beneath that lid was far worse than anything standing above it. She radioed in backup, her voice steady but edged. "This is Detective Hensley. I need a unit dispatched to the abandoned square, old well site. Possible evidence containment required." She didn't want to say more, not until she knew. Minutes stretched like hours. The dog would not leave the spot, circling, whining, pawing, its howls rising and falling like some ancient ritual. By the time the first patrol car pulled up, Clara's nerves were raw. Officer Daniels, young and eager, stepped out with a flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "What's got him so riled up?" Daniels muttered. He aimed the light down into the cracks between the boards, and for the briefest moment Clara thought she saw something glistened pale and wet before shadows swallowed it again. The smell hit her next, sour and unmistakable, a stench of rot that clung to the back of the throat. Daniels gagged and pulled the collar of his jacket over his nose. "Get the lid off," Clara ordered. Her voice left no room for hesitation. It took three of them, prying and straining, the dog snapping and clawing at their sleeves as if urging them to hurry. When the wood finally gave way with a splintering crack, the night seemed to hold its breath. Clara leaned forward, her flashlight trembling slightly as the beam cut into the black throat of the well. What it revealed froze the entire square. The water inside was gone, long evaporated, but the damp stones cradled something else. Cloth first tattered, colorless, clinging to bone. A shape hunched against the wall, collapsed in upon itself. Fingers curled stiffly, reaching for air that never came. A skull tilted back, empty sockets, staring upward as though pleading to anyone who might look down. Daniels stumbled backward, whispering, "Dear God." His voice cracked, the words lost in the echo of the dog's relentless howl. But Clara did not look away. She felt the weight of the discovery press against her chest, heavier than stone. This was no accident. No forgotten tragedy. There were bindings around the wrists, rusted metal glinting beneath strips of fabric. Whoever had been left here had not gone willingly. The dog lowered its voice to a mournful whine, pacing in tight circles before sitting beside Clara, as though it had been waiting all this time for someone to understand. She reached down, fingers brushing the scruff of its neck. Its body trembled under her touch, but it did not pull away. "Sealed the scene," Clara said firmly, straightening though. Her stomach churned. Her voice carried over the stunned silence of the officers. "Call in forensics. No one touches anything until the coroner arrives." As radios crackled and orders flew, Clara kept her eyes fixed on the darkness of the well. One thought burned in her mind, rising louder than the static, louder than the dog's howls. Who had thrown this person down here, and how many years had the secret waited beneath their feet, cloaked in silence, until a stray dog chose to break it open? And more, pressing still. Why did the dog seem to know? The answers would come, she told herself, but not tonight. Tonight was only the beginning. The square had emptied of ordinary sounds. Radios hissed, boots shuffled, and flashlights cut arcs across stone, yet none of it felt real. Detective Clara Hensley stood rigid near the mouth of the well, her coat brushing against her legs in the night breeze, every muscle held taut. The stray dog remained planted at her side, silent now, watching the darkness below with an almost human intensity. Its stillness unnerved her more than its earlier howls. Animals sensed things beyond logic or reason, and Clara could not shake the feeling that the dog wasn't simply pointing them to a discovery, but guarding it. The coroner's van arrived with grim efficiency. Floodlights were set up, bathing the cracked square in harsh white light, pulling every detail into sharp relief. The old well, no longer a harmless relic, looked like the gaping throat of something alive. Officer Daniels kept his distance, eyes darting between the dog and the black pit. When the forensic team lowered their ropes and harnesses, Clara turned her gaze toward the restless circle of onlookers that had gathered behind the police tape. Word traveled fast in small towns, and already neighbors had pressed in, their whispers feeding the charged air. "Detective," one of the technicians called from below, his voice echoing upward. "There's more than one." The words sliced through Clara's chest like ice. She felt her breath hitch, though her expression remained hard. The crowd gasped, their murmurs swelling into a wave of disbelief. She leaned closer, knuckles whitening, against the stone lip of the well. "Repeat that," she demanded. "2 bodies," the voice confirmed, quieter this time, as if even the stones might listen. "Both bound. Looks like they've been here a long time." Clara closed her eyes, briefly, steadying herself against the tremor that ran through her. 1 body had been tragedy enough, but 2 meant something darker, a pattern, a deliberate act, and perhaps more hidden truths yet to be unearthed. Her mind raced through cold cases, missing persons reports that had gone stale and forgotten in the back of filing cabinets. Had the answers been here all along, under rotting wood and silence? The dog whined softly, pressing its body against her leg as though sensing the storm inside her. Clara found herself reaching down again, fingers grazing its scarred ear. "You knew," she whispered under her breath, more to herself than the animal. "Somehow you knew." The team pulled the remains up with slow precision, the first form swaying limply in the harness. Gasps rippled through the onlookers, some turning away, others craning closer. Tattered clothing hung from the frame, but enough remained for Clara to see something unsettling. A fragment of a badge, tarnished but unmistakable, clung to the victim's belt. Her pulse thundered in her ears. A badge meant law enforcement. This wasn't just a forgotten villager or a lost traveler. This was one of their own. She caught Daniel's staring wide-eyed lips, parted in disbelief, before she barked a sharp order. To the crowd, everyone back, no cameras, no phones. She didn't need chaos complicating what was already unraveling faster than she could process. The second body emerged next, smaller, shoulders narrow, clothing little more than rags. The way the bones aligned told a story Clara didn't want to hear. A child, perhaps barely into their teens. The square fell into suffocating silence. Even the whispers died. Clara's jaw clenched as the floodlights hummed overhead. A dead officer, a child, hidden together in the belly of the well. Her mind screamed questions with no answers. Were they captor and captive, or victims of something larger buried in the history of this place? The stray barked once, startling everyone, the sound ringing sharp like a gavel in the night. It wasn't random, it was as if the dog demanded they all pay attention. Clara knelt and studied its eyes, searching for some sign, some connection. She couldn't explain why, but she felt as though this animal had led her here for a reason. Beyond chance, when the coroner confirmed the officer's remains bore markings of blunt trauma, Clara's thoughts turned darker still. This wasn't neglect or abandonment, this was execution. Whoever had thrown them down there had wanted them, forgotten, erased from memory. But time had not buried the truth. The earth itself had rebelled, and through a starving dog, it had screamed its secrets back into the world. Daniels approached, voice trembling. "Detective, if one of those is a cop, this changes everything. Someone high up must have known." Clara's eyes stayed fixed on the hollow sockets, staring skyward from the gurney. She spoke low, steady. "Or someone high up made sure we never found out." The crowd had begun to disperse under the weight of dread, but Clara knew this was only the beginning. Secrets this old didn't resurface without consequence. Someone out there, someone still alive, had buried the truth. And now that truth clawed its way into the light. It would not go unanswered. The dog leaned against her once more, and she let it, because in that moment, standing over the broken veil between past and present, Clara knew one thing with chilling certainty. This case was going to tear open the town in ways no one was ready for. The night pressed heavier as more officers arrived, their flashing lights painting the broken square in jolts of red and blue. The dog had grown restless, circling the well with low growls, as if guarding the discovery from anyone who dared approach too casually. Clara Hensley remained still, her flashlight angled downward, the skeletal form at the bottom gnawing at her mind. She could almost hear the silence of the grave whispering secrets, daring her to piece them together. What haunted her most was not the body itself, but the way the dog's eyes stayed fixed on it, as though he recognized the forgotten soul lying there. A ladder was lowered carefully into the shaft, the echo of its rungs clattering against stone. Clara's chest tightened as Officer Daniels volunteered to descend. She wanted to stop him, to say it wasn't worth the risk, but something inside told her they needed to confront what lay beneath. His boots clanged as he climbed down, the beam of his flashlight jerking with each step. The air thickened with the foul stench of decay, the kind that clung to memory as much as skin. Detective Daniels called softly, his voice bouncing hollowly upward. "There's more." His light swept across the stones, catching what Clara had missed from above. Beside the skeletal remains lay objects small, scattered, but deliberate. A rusted locket cracked open, its picture long faded. A child's shoe, impossibly tiny, waterlogged and curled. And something newer, something that didn't belong with the rest of plastic evidence tag. The kind used by police years ago. Clara's blood ran cold. The well wasn't just a dumping ground, was once part of an investigation, one buried as deliberately as the body itself. Bag everything, she ordered sharply, though her throat tightened with unease. If evidence had they've been down there all this time, it meant someone had hidden the crime not only from the public, but from the very officers sworn to uncover it. The dog began barking again, frantic, dragging its paws toward the far side of the square. Its leash snapped in Daniel's hands, and it bolted toward the weeds, choking the cobblestones, whining and pawing at the earth. Clara followed, her heart hammering as the dog's claws raked through the soil. Unearthing something that glimmered in the patrol car lights, she knelt beside it, brushing dirt from a shard of glass, then a bent license plate twisted by rust. Her breath caught. These weren't random fragments. They belonged to a car, one that had been hidden beneath the square itself. The officers exchanged unsettled glances. Daniels climbed from the well, his face pale, his gloves smudged with dust. "Detective, what is this place?" he whispered, though Clara doubted anyone had an answer. The dog stood rigid now, staring at her with an intensity that felt almost human, as if begging her not to stop digging. Clara straightened, scanning the shadows of the old buildings surrounding them. Every doorway seemed to hold its breath, every window a darkened eye. "It's a graveyard," she said quietly, "but not one built for the dead. Someone built this place to keep their sins buried." As the forensic team arrived, Clara pulled away from the noise and confusion, her thoughts spiraling back through case files she had read long ago. Unsolved disappearances, cold leads, reports of children gone missing near the outskirts, women vanishing after nightfall, always explained away with rumors and speculation. How many of them had ended here, sealed in silence? The twist clawed at her gut. This wasn't a single victim's tragedy. It was a pattern, years in the making, all pointing to a truth far uglier than a lone body at the bottom of a forgotten well. Someone in this town had used the square as their dumping ground. Someone who had once touched police files, tagged evidence, and then erased it from memory. The dog let out a sharp, piercing howl, and Clara flinched. It wasn't just noise, it was accusation. She stared at the animal, realizing it hadn't merely stumbled upon the well. It had led them here with intent, guided by instinct or by a bond she couldn't yet explain. Who had it belonged to? And had that missing owner been one of the voices swallowed by this pit? A chill tore through her as Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Detective, what if whoever did this is still here, watching?" The thought rooted itself deep. Clara's eyes swept the rooftops, the alleys, the tree line beyond the square. The night seemed to lean in, pressing against her skin. Somewhere unseen, the one who had turned this place into a cemetery might still be keeping guard, content in their confidence that silence would last forever. But the dog had broken that silence. Clara exhaled slowly, steadying herself. This wasn't the climax of the story. It was the hinge, the turning point where shadows began to unravel. The body in the well was no longer just a corpse, it was a key. And if she turned it, the lock it opened would expose something far larger, far darker than she had ever imagined. Still, as the square filled with uniformed bodies and the hum of radios, Clara could not shake the sense that the night itself had shifted. The dog at her side lowered its howl to a low, trembling growl, eyes never leaving the dark beyond the square. Something was waiting out there, unseen. Something that was not finished yet. The air in the square had turned heavy, pressing down like an unseen weight. Floodlights now illuminated the well, throwing stark shadows against the cracked stone walls, and yet the sense of darkness seemed to deepen instead of fade. "Detective." Clara Hensley stood at the edge, her eyes fixed on the skeletal remains below, but her mind kept circling the same thought the dog knew. Every detail pressed against her like a puzzle piece refusing to fit. Why had this stray, of all creatures, been the one to lead them here? The dog whined again, shifting closer to her leg. She could feel the tremors still running through its body, the instinctive fear that hadn't vanished even with the discovery made. Clara crouched, resting her hand against its neck, and felt its heartbeat racing beneath her palm. It wasn't loyalty that bound the animal to this spot. It was something deeper, something primal. As her flashlight caught the rusted bindings, again Clara's stomach tightened. This wasn't just a forgotten victim. Whoever had been buried here had been left as if someone wanted them hidden forever, their suffering drowned out by silence. Daniels returned from his patrol car, a radio still clutched in his hand. "Forensics are on the way," he said, voice uneven. His eyes darted toward the well, but never stayed there for long, as though the hollow sockets staring up might somehow reach for him. "But there's something else." Dispatch said this isn't the first call about that dog. People around here reported it howling at night for weeks, always near this square, always circling the well. Some folks thought it was rabid. Others said it was bad luck. Clara's gaze lingered on the dog, then shifted back to the well. Weeks that meant the body had been waiting much longer than they realized, and the animal had been desperately trying to drag attention to it. The thought made her chest ache, in a way she couldn't quite explain. She looked again at the tattered remnants of clothing on the skeleton, and a sudden flicker of recognition passed through her. A bad-shaped outline, rusted metal barely clinging to the fabric. Her pulse quickened. "Daniels," she said slowly, her throat dry. "Shine your light here." On the chest. He obeyed, angling the beam downward, and the truth surfaced in the glint of corroded brass. It wasn't just any badge, it was a police badge. The remains at the bottom of the well didn't belong to a stranger. They belonged to one of their own. A chill swept through the square, colder than the night air. Daniels swore under his breath, stepping back as if the realization itself was contagious. Clara's mind raced. An officer, stripped of their weapon, bound, and left to die in the dark. Someone had gone to great lengths to bury more than a body here. They had buried a betrayal. The dog lifted its head then, howling once more, but this time the sound was lower, mournful, a cry that seemed to rise for the dead. Clara swallowed hard, her composure threatening to crack. Questions pressed against her from every angle. Who was he? How had he been forgotten? And most of all, why had no one searched for him? She could almost feel the weight of his story, pressing against the stones, clawing to be unearthed. Clara drew a long breath, her voice quiet but resolute. "This changes everything. Whoever did this didn't just kill a man, they killed a brother in uniform." As the words left her mouth, the sound of tires crunching gravel reached her ears. The forensic van was pulling into the square, headlights slicing across the shadows, but even as the professionals approached, their tools clinking in their faces, set with practiced neutrality, Clara knew the true investigation was only just beginning. The dog had dragged them into a secret that was far larger than they had prepared for, and somewhere beyond the circle of light, someone who wanted that secret buried was still out there. And for the first time that night, Clara felt the well staring back at her, not as an empty relic, but as a warning. The ground had given up one truth. How many more still waited, buried in silence, waiting for the right howl to bring them into the light? The night had grown still by the time the coroner's team lowered the remains onto the stretcher, their gloves moving with quiet precision. Floodlights hummed, throwing a harsh white glow across the abandoned square, yet Clara felt as though she stood in the center of a shadow that light could not touch. The skeletal frame, the badge, the rusted cuffsole of it told a story no one wanted to believe. An officer had been betrayed, discarded in the darkness of a well while the town above carried on, unaware, and yet it had not been silence that revealed the truth, but a stray dog's cry that refused to let the past rest. The dog sat near Clara's feet, chest rising and falling in shallow breaths, its eyes locked on the stretcher as though unwilling to look away. It wasn't just loyalty. Clara realized it was grief. Perhaps the man had fed him once, or perhaps the dog had found his scent and chosen to stay howling until someone finally listened. Either way, the animal had carried a burden heavier than any words could capture. In its raw, instinctive way, it had given voice to the forgotten. Clara knelt beside it, resting her palm gently against its head, and whispered, "You brought him home." Daniels hovered nearby, his face pale beneath the light. "What do we even tell people?" he asked, quietly. His voice held more than fear, it carried shame, as if the ground had exposed not just one man's death but the failure of everyone who had once worn the badge beside him. Clara didn't answer right away. She was staring into the hollow of the well, now empty, yet still radiating the weight of what had been hidden there. The dog's howl still rang in her memory, haunting, unrelenting. There was no way to soften this truth. The only thing left was to face it. "We tell them the truth," Clara said finally. Her words carried the calm edge of resolve, that he was one of us, that he was abandoned where no one should ever be abandoned, and that it took a stray to remind us what loyalty really looks like. For a long moment, silence settled again, broken only by the shuffle of boots and the low hum, that of equipment. Then Clara noticed the dog inching forward, its gaze following the stretcher as if unwilling to let the body leave its sight. The animal's ribs showed beneath its fur, its frame trembling with exhaustion, but its eyes were fierce, unwilling to abandon what it had guarded for so long. Clara stood, her chest tight with a mix of sorrow and admiration. "Take him with us," she ordered softly. Daniels looked at her in surprise, but she met his stare. He earned that much. He carried this case on his back before we ever saw it. The dog was lifted gently, swaddled in a blanket by one of the officers, though it squirmed and whined until it could see the stretcher again. Only then did it quiet, resting its head against the fabric with a low whimper. Clara followed as they walked the square, each step echoing against the emptiness of the night. She could not shake the feeling that the dog had been chosen as the messenger, carrying a voice from beneath the earth until the living could no longer ignore it. As the van doors closed with a final, echoing thud, Clara turned one last time toward the well. The square looked deceptively peaceful now, the lid shattered, the stones glistening under the artificial glow, yet she knew the place would never be the same. Every brick of it bore witness to silence, betrayal, and the loyalty of a creature the world had dismissed as unwanted. In that moment, Clara understood that the investigation would reach far deeper than the bottom of the well. There would be names uncovered, truths forced into daylight, and a reckoning for the silence that had lasted too long. But for now, she allowed herself a breath, her eyes fixed on the dog's weary form. The stray had guarded a ghost and called the living back to listen. And as dawn began to bleed faint light into the horizon, Clara felt certain of only one thing, that sometimes justice does not rise from sirens or from men, but from a howl in the dark that refuses to be ignored.